My story starts off when I was about 9 years old. My family was pretty much always poor, and I lived in a small town where there wasn't really much help or services, so I spent a chunk of my childhood living in hotels. Before I go any further, I want to ask that people don't use this story to bash my family. My situation wasn't the best growing up, but regardless of that, my parents made sure I had a roof over my head and food to eat, which is more than some other kids I knew, so please just be respectful. But as I was saying, most of my childhood I lived in hotels, well, two hotels to be exact. From about 5 to 9, I lived in the hotel that I'll call the Marriott for the sake of this story. It wasn't very clean and had a bunch of violations, so it ended up getting closed down a little after I turned 9. There weren't many other hotels in my town. Most were way too expensive for my family's budget, but eventually we ended up settling for one that was just a little over budget. I'll name it Motel 5 for the sake of this story. While it was slightly better than the Marriott, it still wasn't the cleanest and had an old-timely build to it. The one thing me and my family did like was that me and my older brother finally had a closed-off room. Most hotels we had lived in only consisted of a shared room with 2 beds and a bathroom. This one actually made it where the 2 beds were in separate rooms. At the time, I was excited to finally be getting my own room, even if I would be sharing it with my older brother Buster. The first day we arrived, I remember actually being quite happy. It wasn't the best, but it was a cleaner, bigger, and more positive environment, and being 9, that was all I really wanted. That day, everything was completely normal, but that night something strange happened. I was in bed, sound asleep, when I started hearing this stretching sound. It was like a cat clawing at a door, but faster and louder. I slowly sat up to see what it was, and that's when I noticed this dark figure. It was standing at the opposite end of the room, clawing in the corner and mumbling something. As my eyes adjusted, I began to realize it was my brother. I honestly didn't know what to say, so I just watched for a second until he stopped. He turned to me, and I swear his eyes were as dark as a black hole, almost like something you would see in a movie. Then I hear him mumble the words, "Let her out," under his breath as he began to approach me. I just stared at him as he got closer and closer. As he neared me, it's almost like his eyes turned back completely normal. But he didn't do anything. He just got back into the bed and fell asleep. I was completely shocked by this. My brother had never done anything like this, and he wasn't the type that would go this far just to scare me. As I sat there watching him, all those positive feelings I felt earlier quickly vanished. I just instantly felt numb and unsafe all over. The next day, I didn't mention anything. My brother was acting completely normal, and my family just seemed happy with the new arrangement. I found out that my mother would start a new job in a few days to help out with the bills, so both her and my father would be gone a bit more. That day, to celebrate, we pretty much got pizza, chilled out, and enjoyed each other's company, so I quickly forgot about the incident. Everything was actually fine for that whole week, so I pretty much let my guard down completely. By the end of the next week, my mom had been working for a few days. On this particular day, I was laying in bed watching TV when my brother asked if I wanted to see something cool. Of course, I said yes and followed him outside. He took me to a small entryway that was at the back of the hotel. It was basically a crawl space. He told me to go in, and I refused. Then he told me that he had dropped a ball down there and just needed me to get it. I looked in the crawl space and actually saw the ball and realized he was just too big to go in. "Fine," I said as I got down on my knees and went through the crawl space. It was small and dark, of course, but not too scary, honestly. I made my way down this dark passage until I eventually reached the end and got the ball. I turned back to Buster to make my way back when I noticed he was on his hands and knees trying to get into the crawl space. "What are you doing?" I asked. "I thought you couldn't fit." I know this is gonna sound crazy, but I saw the darkness in his eyes again. He smiled, one of the most terrifying smiles I ever seen, and then in this low, creepy voice murmured, "Let's play a game," before dashing at me as quickly as he could in the tight space. I instinctively got back, turned around, and went as quickly as possible. I heard him laughing as he followed me through the crawl space. My heart was racing and tears covered my face. The crawl space was a lot bigger than I had imagined. It seemed like every second I was going deeper and deeper into it, and there was just no way of getting out. I was trapping myself deeper and deeper. Then it's like I could hear the faint sound of a baby crying and a woman screaming. As I crawled through, it got louder and louder to the point where it was pretty much unbearable. I suddenly stopped and everything went numb. All I saw was darkness as I fell to the floor. I woke up a few hours later in bed with my mother next to me crying. My brother told them that I had gotten overheated while we were outside playing and fainted. Now, before you guys say anything, my parents could just not afford taking me to the hospital at this point. We already had multiple run-ins with the state for being pretty much homeless, so the hospital was always just something that was only used if someone was absolutely dying. Anyways, while I didn't say anything about the situation, I still remembered everything. I knew that I didn't just faint, and that my brother chased me down the crawl space and pretty much gave me a heart attack. Although everyone was upset about the situation, my mom took it the hardest. She felt like she couldn't do what she needed to make sure I was okay. To make a long story short, after a full night of my mom and dad arguing, I was informed the next day that we would be moving within a week and not to another hotel, but to an apartment. As you can probably guess, this felt like the best news ever. At this point, I just knew something was wrong with this motel and just wanted out of it. I didn't care where we went. That night, I was laying in bed when I remembered the first incident with my brother. I had completely forgot about it, but I remember him stretching the wall once again. I don't know why, but something deep inside me was telling me to check the wall, so I did. I went up to the wall and started to peel at the wallpaper. I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary, so I was going to lay back down, but I soon noticed deep in the corner of the room there was a different shade of plaster on the wall. I went to the kitchen area of our room and found a knife and made it back to the wall and began to chip away the plaster. In as little as 2 or 3 minutes of chipping, I made it through the wall to an opening where a small box was. Inside the box was a small key and note that had 3 phrases on it. It said, "I didn't do it. It was Sam," and check the crawl space. At that moment, it's like I could almost feel a breeze go down the back of my spine. Then I heard a small but womanly voice from behind me silently whisper, "Thank you." I quickly ran to my parents and showed them the note, and the police were called. Since I was younger, I didn't really get to find out the outcome of everything at that moment, but almost 2 decades later, I finally know the truth. Apparently, this hotel had been around for ages. With that being said, in its early days was a prime spot for prostitution. The room we rented out just so happened to belong to a woman who was a well-known prostitute. She apparently got pregnant by a man named Samuel James, who was extremely wealthy and also married. Because of this, he forced her to give birth in the room, and afterwards buried the baby somewhere in the crawl space. Since people knew that the woman, who we will just call Sarah, was pregnant, they assumed she killed her baby and began to isolate and threaten her. Sarah found out that she would likely be killed for the accusations against her, so she decided to end it all herself. Before doing this, she wrote a bunch of notes saying that it was Sam and hung them around the room. She knew that Sam had connections and would likely have the notes removed, so she stored one along with the alleged key that led to her baby's body in the wall. She then hung herself, and like she predicted, Sam had all the notes removed other than the one in the wall. Unfortunately, despite all this, Sarah's baby or its remains was never found in the crawl space. And, like I said, me and my family were moving that next week. I really would like to think that by letting Sarah's story be known, I set her spirit free. If she was the spirit that was possessing my brother and scaring me, she didn't bother me after that point, and the whole negative atmosphere I felt in the hotel was completely lifted. The hotel has been closed for years now, and every time I pass it, I just hear Sarah's thank you. This experience may have been one of the most terrifying times of my life, but it was also probably the most eye-opening.